All right. Hey, Mark.
Hey Fred,
How are you?
good. You want me to start the recording?
Yep.
Oh, looks like you have to do it.
Okay. Okay. You see my screen?
Yes, I have live demo with a gorgeous mountain cliff view.
Yeah. You see what we're gonna do today?
Ooh, Salesforce, nice. That'll be something I get to learn.
Yeah. It's good stuff, man. So, oh, here's my video. Forgot my video. So, yeah, this is gonna be good. We we're going to actually build. Let me turn on my light. We're gonna build a brand new automation, but we're going to do bi-directional sync, which is really, really cool how we do it in APIANT. And so we're going to build a mind body to Salesforce bi-directional sync, and I'll explain what true bi-directional sync mean and all that. But most importantly, how are you guys doing? Penelope, how are you?
Hello, I am great. Happy Friday. How are you guys?
Friday. Did
Awesome,
you?
awesome.
Yeah, Penelope wasn't feeling well. She feels a lot better. Did you recover just in time for the weekend?
So convenient. Yeah, I did. No, I'm still sick. So I'm not going to be doing anything fun this weekend, but that's
I
okay. It'll be a nice, relaxing. It's really beautiful here, like high 60s. So probably just try to get a little sunshine in the backyard and putz around the house.
I'm
It'll
sorry
be
to
nice.
hear that.
That's
Well,
okay.
we're all wishing you the best, hoping you feel better. And then and Mark still has his hot tub. How do you like your hot tub?
Oh, it's great. I was in there earlier this morning.
Ooh, that's why you look so
I
relaxed.
did a I did a Fred and had my coffee and
Well, I actually switched to late night hot tub with a glass of wine, so
oh yeah, I've done that too.
that's fun.
That both of those scenarios sound fantastic. Either way.
Cool. So let's get started. So mind body Salesforce. We're gonna do bi-directional sync. Mark, are we live on LinkedIn?
I know we are streaming. Let me check restream.
Well, we should be. I'll let you check on that, and I'll
Yeah.
get started. Okay. So let's talk about um, let's talk about what bidirectional sync is. Okay, so bidirectional sync is something that's very specific in the integration world. So you're going to hear folks who say we do two-way sync, but often it's not true two-way sync. Only a few companies do true two-way sync. So let me just give you two scenarios. So if I were going to say, hey, when I create an invoice in QuickBooks, for instance, right? I want that invoice to, or when I push a button, let's say in Salesforce, and I want to create an invoice in QuickBooks, I press a button in Salesforce, it creates the invoice in QuickBooks, and then it returns to Salesforce and adds the invoice. That's not technically two-way sync, that's round tripping, okay? Two-way sync is something much more complicated, which is you've got two records, right? Let's say a contact record or an appointment record or a sale record or an order record, whatever that might be, okay? In two separate systems, okay? So let's take, in our case, we're gonna take MindBody and Salesforce, and both of those records stay in complete sync regardless of where the change is made and regardless of what is changed, with the exception of a unique ID like a contact ID. So what we're going to build is, and I'll share my screen here. What we're going to build is, did I share my wrong screen? Let me see. Sorry. Yeah. So what we're going to build is when a client in MindBody is either created or modified, then either create or update the contact in Salesforce. And so whatever we're building here can be done with contacts, but with any other object. So it could be done any other objects that can be changed through the API. So in this case, we're going to do clients because MindBody allows us to change the client in the API. But in Salesforce, it could be done with anything. In Salesforce, you could do this with an appointment object, a contract object, a membership object, a sale, whatever you want. Okay, and what the system is able to do, Mark, is the system is able to recognize, was the change made by me, the system, right? Me, the integration, or was the change made by a user? Okay, and that's very important because when you see that some integration companies, like I know, for instance, Zapier does not do true bi-directional sync. The reason they don't is because it's really hard to keep track of, is this a user change or is this a system change? Because if you don't differentiate between the two, you're going to get into an endless loop. Because the system makes a change. Oh, there was a change. No, let's make a change back. And so you don't want that. So you need to be able to make it to recognize the difference between, is this a system that made a change, or the integration system, not any system, but the integration system, or is this a user or an external system that made the change? Okay. So we're gonna build it from scratch. But the other thing we're gonna do is, I'm also gonna show you some of the behind the scenes on how APIANT is able to do these bi-directional sync, because we can do bi-directional sync with any API that will allow us. Okay, so you remember when we build an automation, we always when you build an automation, you always have a trigger, right? And typically you only have one trigger, right? Where when you build a two-way sync integration, right, you're going to have two triggers,
right?
Because the reason for this is because the either system, the change needs to be monitored in either system, and the change is as a create or an update. Okay, right. So let's start, and I'll start building the two triggers. So first, I'm gonna add the Salesforce trigger. And in order to see this better, I'm gonna make this, I've noticed on previous recordings, people were having a hard time seeing what we were doing here. So I'm gonna make this a little smaller here, and I'm gonna share just this one screen for now. At least we'll have a better view of what I'm doing here, okay? All right, so I'm gonna add a Salesforce two-way sync trigger. So when you come here and you look at Salesforce, you see you have a two-way sync new or updated object record. Now that's really cool because it's a two-way sync. Think about the power of this. It's bi-directional sync for anything that's an object in Salesforce. It's not just for contacts or just for accounts like companies, but it's for anything that's an object in Salesforce. So you can imagine when you pair that with another two-way sync, it can get really, really powerful. So you get to choose what the object is here. So in this case, we're going to use the contact object, right? So you can see on the right here because I'm not sharing, but I'm going to put, and this could be any object, and an object is basically like a table, right? A table with different records in it. So I'm going to choose the contact object. I could have chosen the account object, and then you can create objects, right? So you can create any object that you want. There's two types of if you're going to keep track of people, and I'm going to mention this now because it's especially important, people who use MindBody. There's contact, but you also have account. Now, typically, account in Salesforce is a company. So, a company and then multiple contacts below, right?
I gotcha.
But you can also have a person account. So if you ask Salesforce and you tell them that that's the way you work because you're like a, I don't know, like a nonprofit or a health provider, you can say, we want it to be a person account. And let me share this little thing here that I wanted to show you. ¿Dónde está? I want to share, it's behind all my stuff right here. So I found this online that describes this. The difference between a person account. This is from a Commerce Works, and I thought it described it so well. So, and this is just specific to Salesforce, but see, you have using a person account in Salesforce. So here you have parent and child, right? So child is, items of the parent, right? So you can have a business account, and if you have a business account, then the contacts belong to that company. Okay, but if you have a person account, then there's nothing to see here, right? So a person account means your account is for the person. Okay, you just have to designate that with Salesforce. Once you designate it, we can handle both, right? So in this case, we're going to go right to the contact. Okay, so we're going to create contact without assigning a company, but that's what we're going to do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, let me share my screen again. Back to what we were building here. Wrong one. Too many screens. What's with all these screens? Okay.
That's our life.
All right. So in this case, we're going to say we're going to use contact, right? I'm going to fetch the fields. Okay, so let's read this because this is actually kind of important. So this is two-way sync new or updated objects record. A trigger for the two-way syncing new or updated object records with enhanced on-the-fly mapping. Ooh, on-the-fly mapping. It's like a superhero integration. Can only be used with enhanced two-way sync actions that support on-the-fly mapping. So we're going to have to pair that with another on-the-fly mapping two-way sync. And here it says object contact, and then here it says filter data rows to only allow these items. Okay, so here I'm just going to say let's just use those that use an email. Okay, so I'm going to see here say email is not empty. All right, so that's my first, and you can say record filtered data, or you can say none. If you don't record filtered data, it means it's not going to log the records that it found with no emails. Okay, I typically do that so you don't see it every time you run it. All right, first trigger. So this says two-way sync new or updated object record, and in this case, it's going to be contacts. Now we need a second trigger, and the second trigger is basically the other app, right? Because both apps will trigger. So in this case, we're going to use MindBody. And you'll notice that we have two-way sync. We have a two-way sync new or updated clients and a two-way sync new or updated clients instant. Now, this is the beginning of Let's Quiz Mark, because we do this during all these all these demos. So what is the difference between the two, Mark?
Well, that's funny because I always thought that the trigger here was always considered instant because it's like
a webhook.
Yeah, well, okay, hold on a second. So if it's labeled, if we label it as instant, it is a webhook. If it is not labeled, then it's just a API call.
A polling trigger. Yeah.
So
one is fetch, the other one is push. The other one we receive, the other one is we go get it, right? So we're going to use the instant because I like this one better because it's cooler, because it's instant. Nothing like instant.
Well, we don't want it necessarily in a two-way sync. Do you always want it to be as something happens, or
it doesn't matter?
Okay,
it could be either. All right, and then here I'm also going to say if the email is empty, let's not. I don't know why I'm doing this actually. I could keep it without it, but I'm keeping it in right now. Okay. So what do we have so far? We have something very simple. We have two-way sync new and updated records in Salesforce, and then two-way sync new or updated clients in MindBody. So you could add more trigger, but in this case, we're only going to keep it 2 triggers. So what do we do next? Next, we have to decide, we have to identify, right? We have to identify, is this a Salesforce triggered transaction, or is this a MindBody triggered transaction?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the way we're going to do this is we're going to create a conditional branch.
Okay.
Okay. And we're going to say if, and I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to just choose the Salesforce here. We're on dev, and somehow this is not. All right, let's do it again here. All right, so let's just say if Salesforce has an ID, so I'm going to type ID up here and then find, right? If Salesforce has an ID, well, that looks strange. I don't know. I think we're going to have to close and reopen it. It's not empty. Then this is a Salesforce, right? So if what comes through here has Salesforce, right, then it's a triggered by Salesforce.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's how we do this. I'm gonna save this here. Ignore what I'm doing.
It says you need an action.
Oh, that's right. So that wasn't the issue. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I always work on the development server, which is, you know, version number future. So sometime it can get buggy because this is where we test and everything else. Okay, so then if it's triggered by Salesforce, what am I going to do here?
You're going to want to update. I mean, I don't know if there's more to this just yet, but we want to update the Salesforce record.
Why would I want to update the Salesforce record if it's triggered by Salesforce?
I'm sorry. So it's we want to update a MindBody record with the Salesforce information.
That's correct.
But okay. I would think there would be more logic before that.
Not necessarily.
I didn't see. Oh, we're gonna get the info. We're not actually updating it. So we're gonna get the client.
No, we're gonna update MindBody with what we got from Salesforce.
Oh, okay.
Right. So here I'm gonna look for two-way sync.
Oh, gotcha. All right. So this probably, I'm not familiar with the two-way sync at all. So
I know that's why we're doing it. I'm teaching.
Right. So I was thinking we were gonna have to really determine so we're not in this endless loop. You know,
no. I'll show you how that's done. That's a good thought, and I'll show you how easy it is to handle that. So here I'm going to choose two-way sync, add or update client. Okay. There's another one with mappable accounts, but this is when you're dealing with multiple locations and site IDs. No, we're going to keep it simple today. We're going to say two-way sync, add or update client in MindBody.
Gotcha.
Okay. So let's read this. An action for two-way, and I'm reading all of it because all of it is actually important. An action for two-way syncing new and updated clients with enhanced on-the-fly mapping using client email addresses for matching can only be used with enhanced two-way sync triggers that support the on-the-fly. So that's the other side of what we were reading in the trigger, right?
Right.
You can only map. You can only pair a two-way sync on-the-fly mapping trigger with a two-way sync on the fly action.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, what does on the fly mean? On the fly means first you need to decide, have I seen this record on the other side before? Or is this the first time that I see this record, and how do I pair it with another record? How do I decide to add a record on the other side? Or how do I decide to update a record on the other side, right? Because on the fly, it's very powerful. Mm-hmm. Not only can it create a record, but it could also attach to a record that it had never seen before, right? And then the next time it won't even think about it. It'll know exactly what the match is, okay? So let's look at the matching logic here. Select the matching logic. The default is to use the email only, okay? But you can also choose to match the combination of email plus first and last name.
Right.
So this means that you could say, I only want to establish a link on the other side being Salesforce in this case, but it could have been another app, right? If I can find a match with email plus the first and last name. So if you have children, for instance, on the other side with a family, it will only match if there is a match with the first, the last name, and the email.
Right.
Okay. So here we're going to choose email.
Right.
Again, keep it simple. This is not cross-regional. We're going to turn this off. Cross-regional for MindBody is when you have multiple site IDs and they all share data. Okay.
Right.
This is not what this is another demo. Okay. So here I'm going to click fetch data fields. Okay. So now you see something new here.
Right.
You see two-way sync identifier. Okay. Two-way sync identifier is how we keep track of a unique neutral ID, right, for those two records on our side. So the next time there is an update, we don't even look for the email. We don't look for anything else. We have already established a link. Therefore, we're like, yep, that's the two-way sync identifier. Now, how do I get the two-way sync identifier? But like anything else, I'm going to, what's that?
I feel like you're going to quiz me there.
You want me to? You've never seen it before, so I can
No,
quiz you.
so I would figure that two-way sync identifier is going to come from, we're going to use something from Salesforce, since that's the direction it's coming. So then now we have this identifier that's coming from Salesforce in this MindBody action.
You are absolutely right. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to type two-way sync identifier right here. That's the one we want.
Right.
Okay. That's a two-way sync identifier.
Gotcha.
Okay. And then email here, we're going to use the email from Salesforce. I don't know why I'm getting these right here. This is.
I think you probably save and go back out. It'll go away.
I hope so. Okay. And then I'm going to match the first name. Let's do the first name. I'm going to match the last name from Salesforce, and I'm going to match the email. I think I did that already.
So these are the only fields that would update. Is that what you're saying?
Right. That's all I'm doing right now, but I could match anything else, and I can have as many custom fields as I want. Okay. All right.
Quick question on the trigger for Salesforce. I didn't recall if that is an instant trigger because it's not labeled.
It's not.
Okay.
It's not. You could make it an instant trigger. Again, much more complicated because they require some Salesforce customization.
Okay.
But it could be, but it's not. Okay. All right. Now, here, what are we going to add?
I believe we're going to do the reverse, right? Because we're assuming that it's coming from MindBody this time, so we would want to add Salesforce.
That's correct. Thank you.
And then as two-way sync update object record. And then after we set the object, which I don't know what's I'm going to see. So contact.
Mm-hmm. Man, you're good with computers.
Yeah. And then the field is going to be the email because I believe that's what we.
No.
Oh, no.
Moving too fast here.
Okay.
No, I don't want to do email. I don't want to do email here because I want to be able to have a one-to-many relationship. So let me share my whole screen. I never know if I'm sharing the right screen. I think
I saw. I saw
with Zoom webinar, you never know. It doesn't really show you sometimes. All right. So in the contact record, I created a custom field called MindBody Client ID, and I made it required. Okay, so that's what I wanted to do. Now I could do email, right? But you could also do, I want it based on MindBody Client ID. Okay, so again, this is going to show here.
The field's going to show there. Okay, I see. So this was thought out ahead of time prior to.
Right.
Okay.
I added, you can see MindBody Client ID if I wanted to, but I want to go back to what you were saying. Let's do email, which is fine. We can do email, because if we feel good that we only have one email to one email right now, we're good. Okay, so you're right, contact, and then here we're going to do email. Okay,
Right.
and then we need to add the two-way sync identifier. So which one is that going to be?
The MindBody. The MindBody's triggers two-way sync.
Okay, so you see I type 2, only the fields with 2 show up.
Right.
So here we're going to choose the one on top. Okay, and the match value has to be the value that matches this.
Right.
Okay, so here we're going to choose email.
And email should be fine on this case.
Yeah.
Because we aren't even letting anything through unless it has an email.
Right. Right. So here it's going to be the email from MindBody though, right? So the match value here, it refers to that match field.
Right.
So if I wanted to match on anything else, like a client ID or something that, let's say I had done a migration before and I knew that all my client IDs were good,
Right.
I could do a match on client ID, and then I would just have to map the client ID here.
Right.
Okay. All right. And then we're going to sync the first name from the most common mistake that I see is people map the wrong app to the wrong field. So always remember, if you're seeing an icon here for Salesforce and then you're mapping it with MindBody, most likely you're mapping MindBody fields down here.
Right.
Right. There are some exceptions, but most likely, right? So here I'll just put first name, because what they do is that they'll come here and they'll do first and then go, oh, there's a first name here, and boom, all of a sudden they put a MindBody field in there, right? So you don't want that. So here we'll put first name, last name. Oh, last name is required. Interesting. And email.
Now, do you want that, if you were doing the MindBody client ID, would you want to, what if it's, is a new client in Salesforce? Are we going to map that at this time?
Yes, you're right. Thank you. You're absolutely right.
Oh, it's required too. So you wouldn't have got past that if you were to hit save.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So if we wanted to see if we missed anything else, we could click the show only required fields to make sure we had all our.
Right. So I can go right here and say all my required field I've filled out. So that's good. Right. And then everything that I've mapped.
Who determines that required fields? The API, like them?
For MindBody?
Yeah. Is that determined by MindBody, or is that something that we've
That's
done?
a very good question. So it's determined here. So if you go into MindBody and you go to Manager Tools, and you go to required fields, it's the required fields on the business side. So,
but there's only
right here. So
maybe I should reword that, because MindBody client ID is one, it's not, that's, I don't think it's an option on the required business.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at Salesforce. So it's required here. I made it required. MindBody client ID here.
Okay, so those asterisk fields were picked up when you refresh the fields for the trigger. Sorry, if you made something else required, it would also then show up here.
Right. Gotcha. Oh, I could also turn it off. I can turn off the required field here, and then
okay.
Sorry, I was looking at the wrong app. Okay.
Right.
All right. And believe it or not, that's all there is to it.
That's
So
pretty, yeah, pretty straightforward. So when you're gonna save it, obviously.
yeah, and remember, I've only mapped right now, I've only mapped the email, first name, last
Right.
name right here, and here I've only mapped the email, first name, last name, and
Right.
client
So
ID.
if somebody gets married, they change their last name, they
Right.
gets updated in one, it's gonna
But I
automatically.
could map anything else. I mean, I could
Right.
map the address, the first name, phone
Right.
number, I mean, anything, right?
Right.
I do want to point one thing out that's interesting to look at, how different those two are. So these are two actions. This one right here only requires the email once, right?
Right.
The matching logic is the email,
Right.
and they'll take the email from the email field. This one is built a little differently. The matching logic is the email,
Right.
but it has a match value here. So you'll see the email map twice. The
I see.
reason for this is that you can match on anything.
Right.
And that's why you have a field called match value.
Right.
Because it's not only email, it could be, you can match on zip code or whatever. Who we
Yeah,
gonna match
but
on?
those two fields aren't getting updated. That's just what it's using to identify it.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, so let's save it, give it a test.
Okay, so this. All right, so because the Salesforce is not an instant, this is going to become a polled automation.
Ah, that's a really good question. Salesforce Connect. Yeah, that's a really good question. And the answer is yes.
So how does my body webhook work then? If it's
It will trigger it anyway.
okay, so it
won't
doesn't.
wait.
Okay, so it's
So let's go to MindBody and let's see how this works. So let's pick, see if we have Jen. I like this one, Jennifer Best at APIANT.com. I had a friend called Grand Best. This is my favorite name ever. Hey, I'm the best. Okay, so I'm gonna put a note here just to trigger a change, just to see what happens. And boom, see it triggers automatically because it's a webhook on
right.
the MindBody side. So what it did is it had a MindBody trigger, okay, with all the data here.
Right.
It came down here and it says, is this a Salesforce triggered or MindBody triggered? So it said, remember that you can also, when you're in the historical view, you can actually double click on it and see how it's built. It says, does Salesforce have an ID? If it's not empty, go to the right. If not, go to the left. In this case, it was empty, right? The left operand had empty is not empty, so it is empty. So it went to Salesforce, and in Salesforce, it said, okay, we need to create Jennifer Best at APIANT.com because it did not exist. So let's take a look here. Let's see if she exists now in here. I think I have to refresh. You can see my Salesforce, right? I'm sharing it.
Yeah. So a two-way sync will create an account if it doesn't exist. Okay.
Right. So here's Jennifer Best.
Okay.
Okay. So we created her.
Mm-hmm.
You can see her info here.
Right.
And the client ID is 1463.
Right.
Okay. And then here you can see her contact info is Jennifer Best.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So the next test then is, okay, so we have a link with Jennifer Best. So let's see if one of our operators now changes her email in Salesforce. You with me?
Yep. Sorry.
It's okay. All right. So now we're going to see we're going to change her email in Salesforce, and where we're going to want to happen is we're going to want that email to be changed in MindBody.
Right.
Now remember, at this point, it's not going to make a match based on email anymore. It's already established a link between the two.
Okay.
Right. By the way,
And who's remembering that?
who's
Or what's
remembering that?
What's
Well, that's what a two-way sync does.
Okay.
And actually, I think you can monitor that. You can let's see. You can see the two-way sync. Let me look for object ID, two-way sync identifier. I think you can see, I forgot where you can see it, but I think you can see it in the account data. Here, probably in the account data value. Let's see. No, I forgot where it is. I think it might be in the automation dump. You can see it. So right. Yeah, I think right here.
Process.
Yeah.
And processing.
Yeah. No, it was in the account data. Oh no, two-way sync mapping right here. So when you create a two-way sync automation, it has a new menu option called two-way sync mapping. And that's where you can see if there's a link between anything in two-way sync.
Okay.
Right? So I read it earlier and it did all the Salesforce here, right? But if I search this this person here in the two-way sync mapping, you see that there's a link between MindBody and Salesforce. Here's the MindBody ID, and here's the Salesforce contact ID.
Gotcha.
And here's the date. And you can update that and delete that. So if something was synced, two-way synced, and you want to undo it, you can actually come here and actually undo it.
Gotcha.
Detach it, basically. This is where you would detach it, okay? So this is where there's a link between MindBody and Salesforce. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. So now the cool thing is, because we've established a link between the two, now even the email can change, and it's not going to look for the email. It already it knows exactly where to find it because it's established a link. So when I change Salesforce, right, which is this ID, let me show you right here. This is the ID in Salesforce. Do you see it up there?
Right.
Right. This is the ID. It ends with MQAQ, right? That's it right here. See, it established the link. So when I go to Salesforce and I make a change to the email, so you know what I'm going to do, because I'm just a comedian that way. I'm going to call her Jennifer Worse. Right? So I'm going to make I'm going to save a change here, Jennifer Worst. This one is not instantaneous because it's a polling. So in 7 minutes, Jennifer Best here would become Jennifer Worst. So I'm going to run it manually.
Right.
Okay. And now we should be able to do a refresh, and here's Jennifer Worst.
There she is. The best with the worst.
Right. But it's cool because now there's a link between those two contact IDs, client ID and contact ID, and anything can change in the record and it'll keep track of it. And you can see that it didn't do it didn't do an endless loop. It didn't keep on going.
Right. That's
Right?
because of the action itself.
I'm going to show you why that is now. I'm going to dive in pretty deep. So those of you who are developers who are watching this, you're going to get pretty impressed by this, hopefully. But I'm going to show you how we're able to do this. But before we do that, let's do another test. Let's do a test where the client already exists, but it hasn't established a link yet. right? And the way we know if it established a link is in Salesforce, you would have a MindBody ID, right? So here I'm going to add, let's do all contacts, right? MindBody client ID.
Right.
If it's empty, it means that it hasn't established a link yet, right?
Right.
So let's create a brand new person actually. So let's do it. So here I am. I was in Salesforce and the lead came in and I created a person, and this person was called Mark Floyd.
Oh, thought you were gonna do like fantastic or something.
Salutation.
You should change your last name to Fantastic, Mark. It would be so fitting.
Professor. I'm going to call him Professor. Professor Mark Floyd. Excuse
Mark
me.
Fantastic. That just rolls off the tongue.
Yes.
All right,
Mr.
so
Mark Fantastic.
all right, you guys convince me.
I can stretch. You see, I'm gonna stretch. You're gonna see me.
Fantastic. I'm going to put a typo. I'm going to say fantastic. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to put a typo and then we'll fix it in MindBody to see if it fixes it back in Salesforce. Okay, so Professor Mark Fantastic, email called Prof Fantastic at example.com. Example.com, by the way, is a good domain to use if you want to do some testing and it doesn't go anywhere. One of the things that I see is that a lot of developers and people who are testing automations, they put actual emails in there. They're like, oh, test at, test.com. Well, guess what? It's going to go to somebody's email. So Professor Fantastic at example.com. And then I don't have a client ID and it requires me to put one here. So I'm just going to put 000 for now, which is weird, but I shouldn't have made it a required. Okay, so I'm just going to create him here. This hasn't run yet, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that email in MindBody as well real quick. Let me turn this off.
Oh.
Okay, and in MindBody, I'm just going to create Mark Fantastic.
Right. And is that because we're assuming that, I don't know.
I'm just doing it because I'm saying by the time you build the automation, you may have two lists, right? You may have people in Salesforce, people in MindBody, and you haven't started syncing the two. Right. And that's the power of on the fly here is you may not have done a sync. And since remember the on the fly, what it does is to establish a link, it's going to, oh, wrong one. Sorry. That was a previous one. Let me sort it by ID. Okay. To establish a link, what it's going to do, it's going to look for the Salesforce record based on email. Right now, there is no link between those two. Right. Okay. But what we want to demonstrate is that if you had a list of 10,000 in each, and these emails would be unique, the system, as it runs in an export mode, it'll be able to establish the link between the proper moving forward by finding them by email on Salesforce and by finding them by email plus first and last name in MindBody. And then moving forward from there, once that link is established, once you see a record created here, moving forward, even that email can change, and now they're going to be able to change back and forth.
All right.
Okay. So the reason I turned it off is because I didn't want the webhook to trigger an update. I wanted to see if Salesforce could find it in MindBody.
Right.
Okay. All right. So did I create it? Yeah, I did. Mark Fantastic. All right. All right. So Mark Fantastic, Prof Fantastic at example.com, Prof Fantastic at example.com. Okay. So what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to change the first name and you say, oh, you know what? It's not fantastic. It's just fantastic. All right, so I'm going to fix that here. But before I run this, I'm going to turn this back on. 1 minute to go. I'm going to save that. Okay, so mark fantastic, contact, and I'm going to run it. I wonder if it's going to pick, it's probably going to pick, oh, what I just ran. Okay.
Did the webhook from MindBody trigger?
Yeah, I think it just ran. No, it didn't run. I had it off. Let me see. MindBody. Yeah, I did run. And then, yep, it ran. Mark. Oh, it still had fantastic. Oh, it ran before I made the change. Did it? Did I not save? Oh, I didn't save.
Oh, you did. You hit save.
Oh, I did?
Yeah, in the top right.
All right.
You hit save once while it was off,
I
and
was
then you
going too
hit
fast,
save
but it
again.
did find it. Okay, so let's put a note. So it did find it. So here, if I do a refresh on this for the two-way sync, so if I look for this account now, okay, so you see that this account now, it found the QAY, which is right here, QAY.
Right.
So what happened here is it ran and it said, I don't have a match. I don't have a two-way sync established for this. So let me go see if I can find one based on my rule. And my rule is I need to find someone, an account with that email. It found you with an email, established a link. Okay. So now let's see if, but it ran before I made the change. Oh, it did change Professor Fantastic. It was just behind. So I changed it here in Salesforce. So now they match. Okay. So now I can go to Salesforce and can say, you know, Professor not so fantastic. I'm having too much fun. All right. All right. And then here, now we have refresh, Professor not so fantastic at APIANT.com, at example.com. So you get it, right? So first it establishes a link. Once it establishes a link, it's good to go. Now you can change anything in both directions.
Right. So is this automation, the way it's built, okay for if it didn't exist in MindBody, it would then create it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to try it?
Yeah.
All right.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. Where do you want to create it?
Let's create it in Salesforce.
Okay. All right. You know, I'm always the one coming up with these fancy, funny names. Why don't you come up with one?
Oh, let's just do Johnny Bravo.
Okay.
Mr. Johnny Bravo.
Johnny Bravo.
Bravo. I'm pretty sure that's like a cartoon character somewhere.
I thought you were gonna take this opportunity to make fun of me. Okay.
I'm not gonna do that right now.
Okay. What email do we want? Johnny Bravo. Let's just do Johnny Bravo at example.com. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So Johnny Bravo, example.com.
So in this case, did you put in 1222 on the ID?
I did, just because I had made the MindBody ID required.
Right. So it's going to make it that ID,
right? Which is probably not a good idea if you're going to get leads coming in from the outside, because you don't know what a MindBody ID is until it goes to MindBody. So.
Well, yeah, but you can make a MindBody account with its own ID. But in this case, if it was the same, I can assign a mind body ID and I can
Yeah,
change.
we could do that too, but then you want to make sure that it's a unique ID in Salesforce. And also you want to make sure that that's the way you always do it with MindBody, because you don't want it by chance match a MindBody ID that already exists in MindBody. So
Right. Would it throw an error if it didn't happen to be?
no, because MindBody will allow you to have duplicate IDs. So
Oh, I didn't realize that.
yeah. There's in MindBody you have a unique ID and an ID. The unique ID can be changed, but it's using the MindBody ID client ID in the API, not the unique ID. It can report the unique ID, but you can't change the unique ID and you can't create the unique ID. So, okay. So this is gonna run. So in this case, what we want is we want to make sure that Johnny Bravo shows up in MindBody,
Right.
because there's no Johnny Bravo at example.com.
Right.
So I'll do refresh here. And now you have a Johnny. Where's my Johnny? Johnny Bravo.
Oh, at least I didn't go with Johnny Butt.
All right, Johnny Bravo, johnnybravoexample.com. And here in the two-way sync, you'll see.
So the next time so it didn't take that mind body ID of 1222 and assign it.
No, because I didn't map it.
Okay.
I did not. Oops. I didn't map it here. If you look at the mapping, which, hold on, this was hanging up. I think Pascal's probably trying to break it. Okay, so you see it established the link between the two.
Right.
But that's a really good question. So here, you'll see. So when I go to MindBody and I create someone or update someone, the client ID
it's not mapped.
It's not mapped.
Yeah, I see that.
Right.
It was on the first screen. Right.
Oh, sorry. Right here. I'm sorry. The ID is not mapped. You don't want to map it because it's MindBody that sets it. So
Right.
you only report it.
So
Now,
then it'll end up changing it in Salesforce at some point.
Right. That's a really good question too. I mean, here's what you wouldn't want to do. You wouldn't want to follow that up with a Salesforce update to add the client ID reported that it was created, because that would re-trigger a Salesforce. So that would be like an eternal loop, right?
Right.
So yeah. All right. So that's cool, right? So now let's talk about how are we doing this? How does this two-way sync thing work?
I have another question.
Yeah, go for it.
You said not to follow it up with another Salesforce action, but is there an action? Oh, there is. So you couldn't take that two-way sync on the left and also put it, because it is a two-way sync. It knows that it's not in an endless loop thing. So would that do it then, to force the make sure the ID is then matched?
I didn't understand the question.
All right. So we know that MindBody assigned the ID to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you take that action on the left there under the condition that says two-way sync add or update object,
right,
and put that under the MindBody action?
Put what on there?
Copy that action and make a duplicate of it underneath.
No, you don't want to do that.
Okay.
Don't do that. When you do bi-directional sync, make sure you always end with a two-way sync and always end two-way sync, because and I'll show you why in the background. It's because what you want to make sure that the system knows that I'm the last one that touched it, you can stop. But if you follow it up with something else, it's going to keep on going into a loop because it's going to re-trigger it. Okay, so let me show you how we know this two-way sync thing, right? And again, two-way sync for us, because everything is modular at APIANT, the way we do two-way sync, we did it in a very modular way. So why is this called two-way sync and how do we do it? So let me just show you. So I'm gonna close this because we're done with this demo here. But what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna go into the developer mode with the assembly editor, okay? And I rarely show this because you have to have your own dedicated platforms to be able to create your own assemblies, okay? So as a customer of APIANT.com, you wouldn't be able to get into this thing. But for those of you who are watching this, who have a dedicated platform, like a white label APIANT platform in your own ecosystem, you can create and modify your own assemblies. But when you open an assembly editor here, when you open this, and let's stretch it out a little bit. When you open this endpoint, this trigger, because I did it on the trigger, in the assembly editor, you can see how it's constructed at the API integration level, right? How we interact with the API. So it's kind of splitting open this trigger or this action, whatever I'm opening up, right? So could you send a text to the dev team, tell them that I'm in the middle of a demo and just not to work on dev, at least until I'm done, please? Thank you, because I think they're doing some stress testing and stuff. Okay, so here's what it looks like. So here, this is the two-way sync new and updated object record. Okay, so this is the trigger here. This is this one, two-way sync new or updated object record. And the whole code base, right? The whole code base for that trigger is right in front of us right now. Okay, so take a look at that. You have the, I'm frozen. Yeah, it's something is happening here on the others. I don't know what's going on. Well, you know what? I could open it on without changing it. Okay, so I think we're fine now. If it happens again, I'll just go to prod. Okay, so here, the whole code base is here. And we've kind of covered this a little bit before, but these modules are really how we interact with the API. But the reason I'm opening this, Mark, is because I wanted to show you this thing right here. I wanted to show you, see this right here?
Yeah.
This two-way sync, right? This is a trigger type two-way sync add or you can change this to add or update or delete. But this right here is the code that curates the whole two-way sync mechanism that I've just described, where it keeps track, is this me that made the system or not? And you can actually even open this here and see, as a developer who has your own, you can actually see the code that's behind it. And that's really that's all the code base for that piece that keeps track of, is this update or this create a system change or a client change? Do I already have a link between the two? That's what this does. Okay, and this is written in Java, but it's pretty cool. And so again, this is a trigger. So if I open the action, right? So let me just open the mind body action in the assembly editor. So this is a two-way sync mind body action. If I open that, I'm going to find, what am I going to find in it?
Assembly.
But what am I looking for?
Oh, you're looking for the two-way, the I don't know what you call it in here, an action, two-way action
module, the two-way sync module, and here it is. I have two of them, one for create and one for update, right?
Yep.
Two-way sync add client, two-way sync, and these are sub-assemblies. We're not going to get into that, but you can see this. And then, by the way, these are modules. When the modules are put together, they become assemblies, and assemblies are either triggers or actions or connecting an app altogether. So this right here, Active Campaign, for instance, that's an assembly. Okay, so it's pretty cool. It's very, very atomic in its nature, with atoms and molecules and compounds and so forth. What? What? My accent? You're making fun of my accent?
No, just the atoms and molecules. Just
But that's really what it is, because these would be, at least in this scenario, these would be the atoms, this would be the molecule, and then the automations would be the compounds, and then you keep on
Yeah,
going that way, right?
I don't know what you just did, but
I just execute. I'm on dev. I'm fine.
okay.
When you double click, you actually execute it.
Okay.
But you can see that these assemblies also have sub assemblies. So everything is very modular that way, right? You're just kind of building blocks. They build on top of each other. So that's how we do two-way sync. Pretty cool. And those. Oh yeah, there was one more thing I wanted to show you, which was. Okay. Hello. Hold on. Let's finish this. What I want to show you is that these modules that are in these assemblies are separate modules. Let me just close this here. So I can look at all the modules here, right? These are all the assemblies. But if I look for the word two-way, you can see that you have a trigger two-way sync and an action two-way sync. So whenever I put that in an assembly for an action and this in the trigger for an action, I am actually creating a trigger that's two-way syncable with an action of another app. So it's not like we went into the Salesforce trigger and wrote some code to make it two-way syncable. We just have a module that we just basically drag and drop, connected it to the proper other modules in order to make sure that this trigger and this action was two-way syncable. So that's really powerful because you can think of anything that you want to integrate in a bidirectional sync fashion.
Oh.
Then you can do it with the assembly editor.
So that's like a blank, like assuming that the app you're connecting with as a developer has two-way sync capability, like I could take that assembly of the two-way sync and then make this a HubSpot two-way sync.
Right.
Or
right.
whatever.
Right. And to make a two-way sync capability, it just doesn't really take much. You need to be able to read the object or write to the object, because you can't make a two-way sync if you can't write to the object. If it's read only, you can't make a two-way sync, right?
Right.
And it needs to have a unique ID. Now, most APIs do. All objects have a unique identifier, right? Because we need to be able to say, oh, we know exactly who we're looking for. We're looking for this guy. Boom.
So is the two-way sync made, I mean, the API, as long as it's read and write, okay, that just means you can do both. Is it at the level of like APIANT or another company like us? It's up to them to make the two-way sync happen on their platform. No,
it's all us. We're the ones.
That's what I meant. It's up to us to create that. To
Oh, I thought you said them. Okay.
No, or another company. That's their responsibility to make that. Not there's another competitor of ours who is also doing two-way sync in some fashion. It's at our level, right? APIANT, the developer of the assembly, to make that. It's not something that's provided by MindBody or Salesforce.
Exactly.
We are the ones making this possible
to
happen within our platform. Okay, gotcha. That makes sense.
All right, that's it. Pen, any questions?
No questions from me. Let me check the chat. Nope, nothing's come through.
Okay, awesome. So this was cool. It's been a while since I wanted to show the two-way sync capabilities. It's really, really powerful. And again, it's just one of many things that we can do with the assembly and modules. Two-way sync is one thing. There's a lot of other functionality that are very modular that we can just plop into these different assemblies or different actions and triggers that perform in a different way. So it's really kind of cool. And bidirectional sync is kind of like true bidirectional sync, as I've explained it. It's the Achilles heel of the integration space. Many integrations or solutions cannot handle true bidirectional sync. So
is there such a thing using, if you're able to create a two-way sync object in one application or like MindBody, and the other one doesn't, what did, I think you may have mentioned that earlier in the meeting, like what, it's not true two-way sync, but it's like one is two-way, but one isn't. Is
You
that?
cannot pair, if you're going to use a two-way sync trigger, it
Uh-huh.
needs to be paired with a two-way sync action from another app. If the other app cannot handle two-way sync,
Right.
then it's not two-way sync on the trigger either. Now we have add and update triggers that are not two-way sync,
Right.
and you can do round tripping, right? But you have to be careful with that, because the whole reason we created a two-way sync solution is because you could get yourself in trouble and create two one-way syncs in both directions, and before you
Right.
know it, you've got a, you know, an
Right.
endless
Okay.
loop. So,
All right.
right. What we do typically for folks who want two-way sync, but they don't want true two-way sync. And I'll just close with this because it's kind of important. So you'll have, I was just doing one yesterday where they thought they wanted two-way sync between MindBody and Zoho CRM. And then I said, are you sure you want two-way sync? Because remember, two-way sync is indiscriminate, meaning any new record that shows up is going to be synced, which means it's going to either be created or updated in the other system. And then he said to me, well, you know, we've got thousands and thousands of leads that are coming through that we don't necessarily want in MindBody yet. Can you filter those out? Well, two-way sync can't really do that. Two-way sync, it's all, everybody's equal. I just found you. I got to find your brother in the other system. It does it, right? You can't filter it out. So then what I suggest for these integrations is you just do one-way sync between MindBody and Zoho, and then we can do a webhook that's triggered either by an automation or triggered by something that's outside of the system, like a human being with a button that says update MindBody. So that's a kind of a, it's not a true two-way sync. It's in both direction, but in the other direction, it's a manual process. Push the button, or an automation qualifies them. Oh, they decided they want to schedule a meeting. Okay, then go ahead and create it. So that's not a true two-way sync. It's just it's a three-legged stool.
Right. But I think when we first started with the trigger, we said if email is not empty, right? So there was a filter of sort,
right,
on the trigger.
Right.
So and I don't know the details of what you were working on yesterday, but in some case you could, well, can you filter it out at that level? So you have true two-way sync, but it's not going to let it in if, you know, the field that you really need has information or
right. So you could filter some, but then you'd have to do the filter the same on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So you could filter some, but it's always going to consider them. So it's leaving them in limbo, though. That's the problem.
Oh, okay.
Right? It's always going to look at them and say, oh, it's in limbo. So that can add up, right? So you have 10,000 records that don't have a particular quality. Like you say, hey, if it's not ready, checked ready, don't send it. Every time it runs, it's going to say, oh, I've got 10,000 records that I have to look through and say, oh, those are not ready. Gotcha. So it slows down the integration when you do that. So
okay. That makes sense.
Oh, great questions, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Well, thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, and I hope you enjoy this two-way sync.
All right.
Thanks, Fred.
All right, guys.
Mark.